My husband, 31M, won't help me, 31F, pick a baby name, but rejects every name I suggest. Hubby, 31M, and I, 31F, have been married 6 years, together 12. We have a 2-yo and I'm 34 weeks pregnant, hooray. I think we generally have a pretty good relationship, love each other to bits, support each other, listen to each other. But I'm currently feeling really stuck with this situation and could use some advice. As above, I'm 34 weeks pregnant. The issue is that currently, our impending new bubba doesn't yet have a name, nor have we really made any progress towards picking one. So here's the timeline of events. Pre-pregnancy, I already have a long list, 30 plus for each gender, of names that I like, written over many years. I like names, don't judge me. We get pregnant. A few weeks to let that settle, then I mention picking a name.
I read out my lists to my husband. He hates all of them but has literally no ideas himself. We decide to shelve the idea until we find out the gender, so at least we only have one lot of names to choose from, but I ask him to start thinking about it. Have the gender scan at 20 weeks, it's a girl. I bring up names again, he still has no ideas. A few weeks, then I revisit my list with him. He grudgingly tolerates me narrowing it to a short list of about 7 names he dislikes the least. I ask him to please put some time into thinking about names, and to bring some suggestions of names to me. He says he will. He doesn't. I bring up the topic every few weeks or so. Each time, he hasn't thought about it and has no ideas. He is getting more and more irritated each time I raise it. I intermittently suggest random names, and he knocks them all back. When I'm about 30 weeks pregnant and raising it with him yet again, he snaps, "When are you going to stop nagging me about it?" And I'm like, "When you do it, dude?" I shut up about it for a few weeks.
When I'm 33 weeks pregnant I raise it again, and a few days later he finally gives me a single name. One name. I don't hate it, but I also don't love it, and I think it clashes with our last name, which is admittedly tricky to pair first names with. I tell him this and ask him to suggest some other alternatives. He doesn't have any. I bring it up again last night and tell him I'm getting anxious about it. He gets grumpy. He tells me we need to sit down together and work it out. I point out that I've already given about 40 name suggestions by this point. While he's given me one, he needs to put some time in. I issue a deal. I won't bring it up again, but if he hasn't put any effort into this before I go into labor, then I'm choosing a name from the short list of hate at the least names and writing it on the birth certificate. And that's the current state of affairs, at nearly 35 weeks pregnant. Since I know you're all wondering, here's how our 2-year-old's name got chosen.
Essentially same situation, Tim having no ideas and no willingness to talk about it or generate any. Except that at about 22 weeks he randomly suggested a single name. I adored it, and the rest was history. Now, a few things to state for the record. I'm a planner. I like to have things organized and worked out. And I really don't like leaving things to the last minute. I always have a list going, things we need to do, need to buy, need to organize. I do all the mental labor for our family, and always have done, which I don't actually mind a lot of the time. Except for in situations like this. Husband is the complete opposite. He despises making any kind of decision. And the bigger the stakes, the more he avoids doing it. Left to his own devices, he often seems like he would rather blob along in limbo forever, rather than put in the mental effort to consider a decision. Or, God forbid, make a decision and it end up being the wrong one. To me, it is completely ridiculous for us to wait until the baby is here to be working this out. The baby is coming. We know the baby is coming. This isn't a conversation that can be put off indefinitely. And it's not going to get any easier the longer we leave it. My recovery from my first birth was really difficult, due to an injured coccyx and a fussy, sensitive baby who didn't sleep. I'm totally braced to have the same experience again, with the addition of a toddler on top. To be perfectly honest, I'm going to have enough on my plate already without pushing the proverbial poo uphill to Get hubby to choose a name into that mix as well. Due to a range of crazy life stuff that has happened during my pregnancy, the virus that shall not be named, my mom being diagnosed with breast cancer, buying a new house, selling our old one, I also feel like this Bubba hasn't had that much space in my head. I hate the idea of my desperately loved, desperately wanted little girl coming into the world, and is literally saying, yeah, we haven't got around to thinking of a name yet, because nothing says, I love you, like we had 9 months warning you were coming and still couldn't get ourselves organized to decide what we wanted to call you every day for the rest of your life. Right, it feels really rubbish to me. At every level. I think he'd probably tell you that I'm being a pain in the bum and nagging them about this, and let's face it, I probably am nagging him. I think he'd say we have had a busy time lately. True. And he hasn't had time to think about it? Debatable. The man is glued to his phone. I think he'd tell you that he didn't have a name for 4 days after he was born. And that is okay. He's the third of 3 boys to a mother who desperately wanted a girl, and so only chose girl names. I think he'd tell you I'm being horrible by issuing an ultimatum. But I genuinely don't know what else to do at this point. Any thoughts or advice most welcome. TL. Doctor. I'm 31F, nearly 9 months pregnant, and my husband, 31M, won't put any effort into working out a baby name, despite me repeatedly asking him to. I've now told him to give me some ideas or I'm picking something myself, with or without his blessing. Not sure if you're aware or have tried this, but there is an app for choosing baby names, basically like baby name Tinder, where you pair with your partner. Both swipe right on the names you like and it tells you which names you've matched on to help narrow down. It's literally just called baby name. You'll probably have to go through some names you've already discussed, but it might be worth trying to get him on board with it, as it's just swiping on names he'd accept rather than having to think of names himself. That said, this issue does seem indicative of larger problems or negative personality traits he might have. You've said generally the relationship is generally good though, so if it really is just this lack of effort in choosing a name, then maybe something as simple as an app could help, and you can both focus on being excited for the little girl's arrival without this naming problem hanging over your heads. Husband is the complete opposite. He despises making any kind of decision, and the bigger the stakes, the more he avoids doing it. Left to his own devices, he often seems like he would rather blob along in limbo forever, rather than put in the mental effort to consider a decision, or, God forbid, make a decision and it end up being the wrong one. To be honest, I would file this under aspects of someone's personality you need to either come to terms with or decide are a deal breaker for you before you have a child with them. It's a bit late for that though. I think that at this point, you just have to accept that it's going to be game time decision based on the names you've collectively come up with at that point. Whether he contributes some more suggestions or not, I suspect he'll probably come up with something, but not until very late in the game. He despises making any kind of decision, and the bigger the stakes, the more he avoids doing it. Left to his own devices, he often seems like he would rather blob along in limbo forever, rather than put in the mental effort to consider a decision, or, God forbid, make a decision and it end up being the wrong one. Putting aside the deep sense of foreboding this conveys, I fully expect your husband to be posting here someday about how you're fed up with his passivity and on the verge of leaving. I think you have permission to make this choice yourself. He is telling you in every way he can possibly tell you that he is not interested in picking a name for your child. So pick one yourself. Tell him that's the name you're going with, and close the discussion. Forget pressing him to give you ideas. He doesn't want to. He would have done so already if he did. and line up some care for yourself for after the birth. You're gonna need help, and frankly he doesn't sound like the best person to give it. You need someone who can be decisive and proactive while you're zonked out of your mind on lack of sleep and physical exhaustion. That's not your husband, and that's an issue you two are going to have to seriously address when you have the bandwidth to do it. I'd advise counseling before this trait of his does irreparable damage to your respect for him. I think your ultimatum is fine, because he is acting like a petulant child. There is no excuse for, I haven't thought about it, to be his excuse every single time you bring it up, because at some point or other, he has to think about it. The child has to have a name. He's spent 9 months refusing to engage with you on it. Does he act like he doesn't want the baby or isn't excited? Because that's how this comes off to me. Then pick a name you like best and tell him you are tired of nagging him. This will be baby's name, unless you hear of suggestions otherwise, and then stop asking him about it. If he hates it that much, he'll put the work in, and if not, then at least you get a name you like. If this issue isn't specific to baby names and is an issue in other facets of your relationship, then that's a bigger issue than the name. Good luck! It seems you've had a "what do we name the baby" talk too many times already. But have you had the "this is really important to me and your lack of participation in this is hurting my feelings and making me feel completely unsupported" talk yet? And furthermore, have you had the "your inability and unwillingness to make decisions puts a lot of mental stress on me and we need to talk about how to have a more balanced relationship in terms of emotional labor" talk? Because these two things are your real issues. The heart of it is this: your husband hates making decisions and is either unaware of it, how badly this stresses you out, or worse, he doesn't care. I can't say from this post which it is, because I'm not sure what conversations you've had. But if you haven't had any surrounding the 2 prompts I brought up, that is where I would start. The idea of picking a name for another human being to use their whole life gives me huge anxiety. I hear your frustration about wanting him to be on the team to figure this out and not making any effort when you're probably thinking about it all the time. Try not to spin it up into the baby not feeling loved enough. The baby won't know its name for months anyway. I suggest going to the Baby Name Wizard blog and looking for posts about his one suggestion. Usually she has posts about names with similar sounds, or names with similar themes. And if you can figure out some of the characteristics of the names you each like, maybe that will give you some new ideas of where there could be overlap. Yes, you shouldn't have to do this work. Yes, he should be picking up more of the mental load and backing you up in a tough year and be a momentous event for your family. Whatever prevents him from making decisions isn't going to go away in the next few weeks. I know someone named for a part of a magazine name because her mom hadn't picked a name yet and was just looking at objects around in the hospital. Her name is beautiful and she is extremely loved. Just wanted to add, we had a name all picked out for our son, and when we actually met him, it was all wrong for him. And we had to think so hard for a week until the visiting midwife mentioned another name and it just worked. We were going with Otto, which to me is a robust, in-your-face type of name. And our little baby was born very long and very slender, with enormous blue eyes and no hair at all. He became Toby, and it was just right. I feel like this man is really not on board with having another child, much less being a central parent in this family. I get that you just want a baby name. It sounds like you have a whole lot more problems than that. I really feel like the baby name is the least of your troubles, and I would consider picking one that he dislikes the least and being done with it. And then I think you probably need to focus on some sort of marriage counseling or family counseling or something, because it really doesn't sound like he is okay. Just to give an alternate viewpoint, there's no way I could name my baby until after she was born. And if I had a spouse pressuring me to pick a name every few weeks since before 20 weeks, I would have lost my mind. I didn't spend 9 months thinking about what to name my baby, and it doesn't mean I love her any less. I needed to see her and hold her to give her a name. You've tried to agree on one. He made almost no effort. In fact, he actively pushed back on making an effort. This one's on you. Congrats. You get to choose a name you like. P.S. One of my parents named my sister the day she was born without input from the other. It worked out fine. I 100% think he should see a psychiatrist about this. The whole never making a decision until absolutely necessary is classic generalized anxiety disorder behavior, especially if he has any executive function disorders, like ADHD for instance. In these cases, decisions, no matter how seemingly mundane, choosing a baby name is obviously not mundane, but going from a list of 50 to 49 choices would be, are extremely difficult to make, requiring tons of mental energy, so they put off decisions till the last moment when possible, which leads to anxiety, and if the wrong choice is made, that leads to even more decisions needing to be made. All that anxiety becomes so severe that sitting in that anxiety just for a few minutes every few weeks when you ask about names is literally impossible for him. All he can do is shut down completely, ignoring his wife, damaging his marriage, because that is literally a better option than actually experiencing his full anxiety. I'm not a doctor, but I speak to this with my own first-hand experience. I always thought I had zero anxiety because I was a go-with-flow personality. Nope. Turns out I was so constantly anxious I had no idea what a normal should have felt like. Saw a shrink in college. Surprise, surprise, I was diagnosed with both ADHD and anxiety. It's hard to understate how huge an improvement I felt after being treated for those conditions. To me, it is completely ridiculous for us to wait until the baby is here to be working this out. It sounds like you want the baby to be pre-named and he doesn't. Personally, my husband and I cannot name a child without seeing them, so a short list of names is what works for us. Then when our baby is born we choose one from the list. He needs to be more involved in getting the shortlist together, but it sounds like you already have a shortlist of 7 names. How long do you want the shortlist to be? My husband and I had a hard time figuring out a name. We ended up setting up a date to our favorite brewery. They make root beer too, and bringing the baby naming book and going through it A to Z together. Narrowed it down to our top 3 mainly because I wanted to see and meet her first once she was born. And we got a little time together. It was my second Fav as her first name and his Fav as her middle. Sorry, his second favorite. His first was Jubilee after the X-Men characters. His reasoning was because I said I wanted a powerful female name. I had my daughter's name picked out from the moment I knew I was pregnant. For both girl and boy. Baby was shy and this was long ago, so we didn't get to find out the gender before they were born. I'm a week late. I know this baby's name. He agreed to it. We're good to go. Baby gets here. I take one look at her and said, does she looks like totally different name, not even on the short list to you? Yep. We went with a spur of the moment name. The point is, even if you have a name, it might not be what it is planned once she gets there. I think your ultimatum is fine. You have a list of names that he has chosen. And despite them saying he doesn't like him, he still chose those names from the list he was given. So he got to have input. So if push comes to shove, you can choose from those. If he decides to figure this out and suggests some more names before you give birth, then you guys can probably go with one of those. Otherwise, baby is getting a name from your list of 7. I had a somewhat similar experience with my husband, except we also didn't find out the sex before our daughter was born. We had a hell of a time with boy names, especially the middle name. Turns out my husband has some really specific rules for names. Nothing remotely biblical. No honor names. No stereotypical traditional names. No names that he has any possible negative connotations of, etc. I lost my favorite girl middle name, Delilah, because of its biblical connotations, and my favorite boy name, Miles, because of a stupid Adam Sandler movie reference. Miles was an old man name. Honestly, we didn't have one finalized before our daughter was born. Had it narrowed down to 2. But luckily, she was a girl, so it didn't end up being an issue. It was hard for me because I am definitely a planner and I love names. When I could actually get him to look through lists of names to find some he liked, it felt like he was just pulling names out of thin air. He didn't actually have a relationship with any name he picked, except that he felt like it would go, and he didn't have any negative connotations with it. For me, on the other hand, all of my name choices were very purposely decided and chosen with love for our child. Our 2 boy middle names that we were working through were Reese, me, and Ash, him. I finally got to the point where I told him that despite me not loving Ash as a middle name, I would accept it if he told me that it was that important to him and that he hated Reese that much. But that I really, truly loved Reese as a middle name, so could he please keep that in mind. I think I had JUUUUSST about convinced him. Then I went into labor early and baby came out a girl. I'm not sure it's about his inability to make decisions. It sounds like another side of this is that he likes to shoot your ideas down. He strikes me as the type whose knee-jerk response is to say no to your ideas if he doesn't have a better one. Make a deadline. You each have 3 top names. I relate to your situation to a certain extent. My ex and I had a similar dynamic, personality differences. I make big decisions really fast. He basically would wait until it's too late. Opportunities were missed. I recently broke up a 5-year relationship because of it. Because I feared for a situation like you're describing here. Do you want to wait and push for every decision that you will face? Kids come with big decisions. He needs to learn how to deal with that. Ask him what would work for him. Make a decision game plan. Suggest only a few options. 'Cause too many will cause him to shut down probably. Like both of you come up with 5 names for each sex by Friday as a brainstorm. Or, use baby name sites or apps like someone else suggested together. Sit him down for it. Let him express what will work for him. You're a team. That means he has to be involved too. Maybe he needs counseling on something like fear of failure. Maybe that's why he's so afraid to decide. Or, the only foolproof way with people like that, let it be too late. That usually activates people. It worked for my ex. Never changed things for the better as much as when I broke it off. For me it was too late. But I'm happy for him that he's taking control of his life. I'm not waiting around for that anymore though. Not the constructive way to go. But maybe this provides some perspective for you. Not deciding on something is also a decision. In my opinion, the only way to truly fail, even if he decides on a wrong one, at least he tried. Now he's not even doing that. Is that what he wants? A kid with no name? My ex, Sil, my ex's brother's wife, was the exact same as Op. Planning is like breathing to her. Her husband is kind of similar to Op's husband, but not quite to that extreme. Not that it put stuff off intentionally, but he just, forgot, until it had to be done now. And then he did it. How they're still together after nearly 20 years blows my mind. But it works for them, I guess. In any case, when they were pregnant with their son, they actually had 3 name combinations picked out. Because, he might come out and just look or feel like one name versus another, so they were planned for X-Sale, but still a little loosey-goosey for X-Bill. Compromise. Right, turns out, baby came, and they decided within minutes of his arrival that none of their name combinations felt right. No combination of the names they chose ahead of time in love. 3 different firsts, 3 different middles, seemed to fit. They ended up choosing a name neither of them had talked about before. And not until almost 3 days after the birth, everyone in the family was shocked, gobsmacked that she allowed her new baby to remain as baby boy. Last name, in the NICU for as long as she did. Because it was totally out of character. I spoke with her about it once or twice a couple years later. Not sure why, how. It just happened to come up in conversation. And she said that in that moment, she felt like all her planning had only been for her sake, and that she was doing a disservice to her new son, who she felt was a person in his own right, even though he was only minutes old, by just slapping a name on him because she planned it that way. Who knows? Maybe you won't know ahead of time, and it'll just happen organically like it did for your first, just a bit later than you'd like. Honestly, I'm child-free, but picking a name for a baby is a huge, exciting event. I've helped my best friend brainstorm for her son and it was so much fun. If he wants to be an asshole and show the whole time that he couldn't care less about it, he has no right to choose later, or to complain about your choice. Share this moment with someone who gives a fuck. A good friend, sister, your mother. He'll know the name of his daughter after she's born. And #X2OOB. Honestly, this is a total deal breaker to me and I'd never have a second child with this man after going through this frustration and stress the first time. But you do you, honey.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. Epic Ericast is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.